Welcome to Melt University's 2020 summer program. This year, our virtual intern program will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Here's your host, President and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students, virtual summer Melt University 2020. We've got another tremendous podcast today from one of my dear friends, one of my mentors, a tremendous industry pioneer. And as you guys listen to this podcast, you re-listen to this podcast, this is going to be one of the best ones you ever listen to. It's going to be chock full of great advice for opportunities within the world of entrepreneurship, collegiate sports marketing, and where the future of sports marketing, collegiate sports marketing. Ben Sutton is the founder and chairman of Teall Capital Partners. What is Teall Capital Partners? It's a private equity firm with investments in innovation, high growth brands and services such as Riddle Bloom, Tailgate Guys. You've probably experienced a Tailgate Guy. It's your school's Dyehard Fan Supply. You've probably bought great merch from Dyehard Fan. Complex Sports Entertainment, Nickel, and Sunshine Beverages. But more than that, as I said, Ben is a pioneer in sports marketing, collegiate sports marketing, massively successful career. Started his career at Wake Forest University, where, as I recall, was a cheerleader, received his undergrad, his legal degree, law degree as well, and worked in the athletic department of Wake Forest. I know his story very well. We've broken bread many, many times at Wake Forest, and then saw a great need in the marketplace where he founded ISP Sports in 1992, and Wake Forest was the first client of his, the rights holder, the radio broadcast, the in-stadium, the signage, the venue, and over the next 18 years, nurtured ISP into the largest and first media rights partnership to 65 NCAA college and conferences. It was absolutely the leader throughout the period, led the acquisition of ISP by IMG, evolved as chairman and president of IMG College and CLC, helped lead that effort to sell IMG for almost $2.4 billion. That's with a B. And I'm very, very understating this, but I can't tell you the impact that he's had on my career and my life and college sports marketing, and has been honored with many, many, many accolades and awards. The National Football Foundation, Wake Forest, North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame, several buildings on the campus of Wake Forest University, is really helping transform that campus and the student athletes and the students and the athletes as well. So, Ben Sutton, welcome to Melt University.
Thank you, my brother. As I listen to you do all that, I realize how old I must be, or at least how old I must sound to your students.
Well, as we say, there's not a lot of tread left on the tires, right?
That's right.
But
having said that, I spent last night with my dad, who just celebrated the 50th anniversary of his 39th birthday.
By the way, I saw that image.
Isn't that great?
And whatever your dad's on, I want to be on, because
no kidding.
I mean, you guys look like spitting images, but that was a precious picture of three generations of Sutton men. And as I recall, you grew up speaking of your father, you grew up in a fairly modest and humble circumstances in North Carolina, correct?
I did. We lived on the edge of a farm outside of a little rural community in eastern North Carolina called Murfreesboro.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad worked for 30 years there as the business manager, chief financial officer, and my mom taught kindergarten. And it was for the ones that are old enough to remember or have watched the black and white reruns on MeTV, it was very Mayberry-ish. And I think the town, when I left in my high school graduating class was 27 people.
Wow.
I think when I left Murfreesboro, there were maybe 1,500 full-time residents in the town. And I actually have a couple of farms down there now, which is great. So I don't have any
Hmm.
family that lives there anymore, but it was a very nurturing, great place to grow up. And
Hmm.
as you said, went from there to Wake Forest uh, and ended up in the sports business while I was actually in undergrad, like a lot of your students, and interning in the athletic department. And um, yeah, it's been a heck of a run, a lot of fun. I've lived the American dream, that's for sure.
You absolutely have lived the American dream. But talk about what led you to go to Wake Forest and also as an undergrad, your involvement on campus and as you're beginning to develop your career passion. Because at that time, you were there. I was at Auburn. The rights business was in its nascent, so we didn't really know. We didn't go to school going, hey, well, I think we're going to be in the college sports marketing business or the multimedia rights business. So, sort of talk about that grounding growing up from a small town, going to Wake, pursuing that passion.
Okay. I think again, when I went to Wake Forest, I was looking for uh, ways to kind of integrate myself into the university community. And my freshman and sophomore year, I actually worked in the alumni office as an intern. And
Hmm.
then I met the athletic director at Wake Forest my junior year in college, and he asked me to come uh, do my student apprenticeship work in athletics. He ended up becoming really probably the most important mentor in my life, a guy named Gene Hooks,
Hmm.
who was the athletic director at Wake for probably 29 or 30 years. And we're still great friends. Gene, I think, just celebrated his 93rd birthday a few weeks ago. And
Wow.
but we, uh, as I went into law school, he asked if I'd stick around and uh, work, continue to work part time in the department. And I was stringing it together, frankly, about 3 jobs, waiting tables and bartending and DJing. And I was like, yeah, anything I can do to make a little extra money and pay my tuition would be great.
Hmm.
And about uh, maybe 55, 60% of the way through law school, my work really kind of became full time. And when I finished law school in 1983, I ended up just staying on campus and was an assistant athletic director at that point, and working around ticket sales, sponsorship, um, you know, selling advertising on our various uh, the properties that we had that were in house. But what happened, Vince, was that over about a 7 year period of time working there, from about 19 probably 83 to about 1990, I guess I was amazed as I got to know and understand the business that the companies that were in the space, all of whom I had great respect for. Jim
Hmm.
Host had been in the space for many years, and Clyde Lear, and ESPN was playing, as you know, was dabbling in that space, and
Hmm.
CBS was in the space, and so, but all of them were really uber focused on one thing, and that was radio play by play, and nobody was really thinking about all of the other rights that were in the department, and so um, in terms of the big national players. And so, I mean, I use the example, that at the University of North Carolina, right down the road, take a big state school instead of a little school like Wake Forest. I mean, they had one company managing their radio play-by-play, another company managing their basketball TV
Hmm.
coaches and radio shows, and another company managing selling their game day program ads, and another company selling their scoreboard ads, and Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet, so there wasn't
Right.
no digital rights yet. But basically, they had about 6 or 7 different sets of rights at the University of North Carolina, uh, outsourced to 6 or 7 different rights holders, and that's just really, I mean, I thought that was frankly, one of the most idiotic models I'd ever seen, and frankly, it was not indigenous to North Carolina. They were like everybody else. I mean, that's what everybody did. And we'd done the same thing at Wake Forest, but we had multiple issues with different people along the way, and changes in personnel, changes in ownership. And over that 7 years, we ended up bringing all our rights in house. So we got rid of our radio rights holder, we got rid of our TV rights holder, we got rid of our publications rights holder, we got rid of our venue signage rights holder. At that point, there were just scoreboards, as you recall. Nobody in America in college had video boards. And we brought all those rights in house and began to sell them together. And instead of losing a few hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, we all of a sudden were at least break even to making a little bit of money. And we were able to grow our product and make it better. But we also ran into all the things that you would expect to run into. I mean, in terms of bureaucracy, there's federal government, there's state government, and then there's university bureaucracy, in that order. Those are top 3 in bureaucracy across America, no matter what.
The world,
and the rest of the world. And so it was difficult. We still had a great Baptist heritage, and I mean, there were faculty members at Wake Forest at that time who said, "Look, I can't believe we have an associate athletic director who's out selling ads to Budweiser on our radio network." And so we were like, so I came up with this plan to take, for Wake Forest to outsource their rights. I wanted it to be to my new company, let them kind of, frankly, they would be my learning lab. In terms, because nobody else was doing this. Learfield was only in the radio business. Host was only in the radio business. Plus, they were printing a few game programs, and nobody else was doing this. And so we did that in 1992, and we grew from 92 to about 2001. From 1 school to 18 schools, the 18th school being your alma mater, the Auburn University Tigers.
Yep, I remember that.
When I bought Mike Hubbard's company. And so, and they're really, our competitors were, quite frankly, somewhat slow to adopt this model. Learfield was a little bit speedier, and we actually did a few deals with them. But basically, we had an almost 10-year free run of trying to promote and sell the idea that this new disruptive concept was the right way for schools to go, and we were able to go out, and instead of paying a few hundreds of $1,000s in guarantees, to pay millions of dollars in guarantees to our school partners. And in so doing, get longer term contracts, because the average contract in the space was probably 3 or 4 years at that point. And so you could build some real sustainability and viability in your model. And then from about 2001 to 2007, we added 50 more schools and conferences, and became really, I mean, we were clearly, even from the early days, the market maker. And I say that with great pride for my team. But I mean, everybody else had done it one way for 20 to 70 years, depending on which company you were talking about. There had been no evolution in the space whatsoever in all those years. And we come in, and all of a sudden the upstarts got, 12.5 schools. And then the next 5-6 years, we averaged adding 8 to 10 new major university projects per year.
That's amazing.
It was really an incredible time of growth for us. But the funny thing is I sit here and think about kind of where we are today, is that I've done more. I really shouldn't smooth it out that way. Really, 70 to 80% of our growth. Remember, now we founded the company in 1992. That was a recession. 1991 to 2001 was a recession. You have the Great Recession, then you have, 99 to 2001, then you have 9/11 on top of that, and then you
Yep.
have the Great Recession, 2000, late 7, all of 8, and part of 9. 70 to 80% of our growth came during or in the first year or two after each one of those recessions. So we were really we were prepared each time for kind of other bowling pins to fall down in the space and our bowling ball to roll through the lane. We conserved our cash. We continued to invest in the business. I didn't have partners, and the bank was my number one friend, and we built what became a very formidable enterprise. And I had some conversations in 2009, I don't know, 2010, I guess it was, with Teddy Forsman and George Pine about putting our companies together. They had what was left of the old host regime, and they had they'd bought Bill Battle's company,
CLC, right?
CLC, which is a great company. And I think and for your listeners, I mean, Bill, I consider Bill one of my great professional mentors in my life. And so, he, I I talked to he and Pat during that process about the prospect of rolling into that business, and it ended up being the right thing for us to do at that time. We took our 65 multimedia properties, our ticketing company, which is now Learfield IMG College Ticketing, and we took our stadium seating company, which is Learfield IMG Stadium Seating today. We took our 3 companies over, paired it with the I don't know, I think they had maybe 10 multimedia properties at IMG College at that point, 10 or 12. They had some good schools though. And then they had the CLC business, and now you had 4 different national market leading businesses contained in one place, because you had trademark protection licensing along with your market leading multimedia business, your market leading ticketing business, your market leading stadium seating business. And it was really a great time. And the next 4 years, we took that business. We grew the multimedia business to over 100 schools and conferences, from a combined 75 or 80 to something like 105. And our stadium seating company ended up at about 150 different places. We had 200 clients in the licensing company, and 45 or 50 clients in the ticketing business. And so when we sold in 2000, we closed the deal in 2014 to WME and Silver Lake Partners. It was a great opportunity to either stay or to go. And I felt like I had done what I wanted to do. And I also knew that, the difference between owning the whole enchilada like I did at ISP to owning, all of a sudden at IMG, I was only the 6th largest shareholder in the company. I was the largest non-institutional shareholder, but there were 5 big institutional shareholders in front of me. And in the new deal with WME Silver Lake, I was going to be, have a minuscule ownership percentage. And I looked around and thought, the one thing I've seen in sports, and I'm not going to say names or anything, but one of the things I've seen in sports from a coaching perspective, a player perspective, are people who kind of outstayed their welcome.
Right.
And I looked and I'm like, gosh, we're by far and away the largest, biggest, and best in multimedia, the largest, biggest, and best in seating, largest, biggest, and best in licensing, trademark protection, largest, biggest, and best in ticketing. We're number one in everything. That's the right time to walk away.
Right.
And so, and that's really, I mean, I did. And frankly, I stayed on as like chairman and chairman emeritus for a couple of years, and you know, had fortunately the option to stay for a couple more years if I wanted to, but it just didn't appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an entrepreneur and a builder, and so about 3.5 years ago, I called some of my mates that were in my C-suite that built that business, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They were the principal builders. I get maybe too much credit for that. I may have been the architect, but they were really the builders and large part
Mm-hmm.
of the business. So, hey, if 4 or 5 of you want to go back in something, I'm all in. I'll put money in. I'll raise money from my friends. And there's so many things that we didn't finish. If we had owned the business, we would have been in 12 business lines,
Right.
not just the 4 we were in. And so why don't we go out and chase some of these other things, create jobs? I literally believe that's why God put me on earth, was to kind of live the American dream and be a wild-eyed free enterprise capitalist, which, by the way, is the only moral form of economy in the history of humankind.
Right.
And so they said yes, and so we have had more fun. We've bought probably a dozen companies, organized them into 6 different verticals, um, and we bought uh, you know the set of earnings and the set of revenue that we bought from those dozen companies has grown almost 6-fold in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 years ago I was sitting here with 3 partners, and today we have, I think, 400 or 450 uh, full-time employees between our various companies. And those are mostly new jobs and created through the opportunity that my core group of builders has created.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we sit. You go into it's been 28 years since we developed that first model for multimedia rights. There's been very little refinement or evolution in that model. Um, it's pretty well documented publicly that the 4 principal companies that operate in that space, that there's some difficulty in the market right now, I guess, that's probably all I ought to say about it.
Right.
And we see lots of other opportunities beyond the media rights space, but um, we thought we were kind of done with our fund one investing, and that we would just kind of double down on the stuff that we had. And we
Mm-hmm.
built out a strategic plan for a new business, um, an expansion of one of our current enterprises, a big expansion of one of our current enterprises, and then opening a new business. But we weren't going to launch that until 2021. And there is just so much opportunity out there right now.
Right. Well,
But
let me tell you this. You've given us a lot to unpack, and I'm going to throw some
yeah,
unpacking at you because uh, part of the purpose of Melt University is to help our students network with industry leaders and pioneers such as yourself. Part of our mission is to open their eyes to other opportunities that may exist, knowing that the job market is going to be brutal post COVID, because you've got a lot of people in marketing services out of work who might be willing to accept lesser money and lesser opportunity to get their foot back into the industry. In other words, it's a buyer's market for talent. And so um, opening opportunities in kids' eyes to Ben Sutton and Teall Capital. So I want to step back. You talk about the importance of mentors. Talk for a minute. When you're at college, it's the ultimate professional laboratory, surrounded by massive opportunities at the Wake Forest Athletic Department, at the Auburn Athletic Department. Then the importance of building and maintaining those relationships. So talk about, because I think you're probably one of the best relationship people that I know in the world. But what are those traits? What are those tricks? Talk about the mentors and the relationships for a minute.
So over my career, I've literally interviewed thousands of young folks for job opportunities, or done coaching sessions and with them. And and I would tell you that I'm a big fan of, I mean, every job we post. And I mean, even before the digital age, every job we ever posted, anywhere, anytime, you would have 100, 500, or 1,000 applicants. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just remarkable how many people want to be in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always told young folks that I think, really showing effort really matters. I mean, it's, um, and doing all the extra little things. And so for me, when if my recruiter for the 6 companies who sits across the hall from me when I'm in the North Carolina office, um, you know, she gets has an entry level job, has 334 looks at it with resumes that she can
Yep.
pull up on LinkedIn or wherever, all the other tools that she might use. Uh, how do you make the first cut? I mean, nobody can sit there and go through all of those. So how do you make the first cut? Well, I think you make the first cut by looking at things like, did they was their course study in an area that would be helpful to them in the pursuit of a career? If this is an area of passion for them, they took a few business classes, majored in business. I mean, I majored in history, but I'm going to tell you, the business guy is going to get a better look, first look, than the history major is.
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
did they build some experience in their body of work? You know, my kids were just like me. I mean, they're pretty industrious, and I mean, but I would have insisted that they go to work as soon as they were basically able. I think in North Carolina, it may be a national thing. They could get a work permit when they were 14 and a half, and they had their first jobs the day they turned 14 and a half,
Mm-hmm.
working for somebody else, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so showing, the effort to be out there and getting on the job training, and especially if you're going into sports, to find opportunities to work in and around sports, even if it's just volunteering on the senior or the Champions Tour PGA event at Sugarloaf, you know, and being there
Spot
2
on.
days before the event and working as a marshal the whole week. You will learn so much in that
Mm-hmm.
environment. And even if it's stringing together 10 weeks of 10 different types of internships that way,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, that just shows even more initiative. And then when you're doing that, to take the time to build your network and to meet as many people as you can, because the world is a one giant circle, and we circle this thing called the sun in the middle, and the circle of life is such that it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. If any, I mean, people should just never burn bridges, because things just go around and they come around. and
Mm-hmm.
and so go find the people. If I were working the tournament at Sugarloaf, I would seek out like a heat-seeking missile the director of the tournament, even if it was just 5 minutes. Can I meet you when you get here at 6 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday morning to get the pro-am started? Can I just buy you one cup of coffee and have 5 minutes of your time? Every little tidbit like that, I think, is really, really matters. And and it's interesting. The earlier that you start, obviously, the more the more ripples you're going to be able to create in the pond. I've got a young lady that's a volleyball player, or was a volleyball player at Wake Forest, finished up business school this spring, or just finished it. And it's so funny because she's like the epitome of a young student entrepreneur. She's like created like 2 businesses while she
Wow.
was in school, while she's in grad school. And just I'm blown away. Like, she's taken my what I would say would be this advice, and she's taken it and put it on, I hate to use this term, but on steroids, and the
Mm-hmm.
multiplier effect is unbelievable. And she really kind of has her choice of where she might want to end up in this profession. She's
Mm-hmm.
got the graduate degree, student athlete, had jobs, started her own business, went around and met everybody that she could meet that was in sports in the Piedmont Triad of North Carolina, the ACC commissioner, the athletic director at Greensboro, the athletic director at Winston-Salem State, North Carolina A&T, Wake Forest, etc. And and then you can just see how she confidently presses down on the accelerator and
Mm-hmm.
and her career is just in this lurching trajectory now. So I think that's big stuff. The other part I would say is um, you you are right. I mean, this is an employer's market right now, not a prospective employee's market. And boy, what a
Mm-hmm.
turn! That's a complete flip from 100 days ago.
Oh,
That's a complete
unbelievable.
flip from 100 days
Unbelievable.
ago. And so now, and that's just the nature, again, it's the circle of life. It's the
Mm-hmm.
pendulum swings, right? So, but what I would say to any young person is that I wouldn't be discouraged. In fact, the you know the people who win at the end are the people who embrace change. I mean,
Amen.
if you can be a person um, that embraces change and sees, kind of where the puck might go, not where it is, to use the old Wayne Gretzky um,
Mm-hmm.
notion, that is a real skill. So embracing change, kind of thinking about, what can I do to peek around the corner and see things before everybody else sees them. So that means this word gets used way too much, but that means being disruptive. That means, reinventing businesses. Um, I think the model we invented, for instance, in multimedia rights in 1992 at ISP Sports, I think it's been broken for 10 years.
Right. I
And
agree with that.
I think it's going to be, it's hard to pivot if you're kind of locked into that model. It's kind of hard to pivot to another model.
Right.
And you can try, but then you sow the seeds of competition when you do that.
Right.
And so, but I think understanding that the world was never meant to be the way it was. It was
Right.
meant to be the way it could become. My dad used to say something to me, Vince, and he says, son, there's really no such thing as a status quo. You're either getting ahead or you're getting behind.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
doing things the way you are, keeping things the way they are, that means you're getting behind because there is somebody like Vince Thompson or Ben Sutton who's going to lap your ass because you
Yep.
thought the way you did it was the only way it could be done and it was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be that way forever and ever. And
Mm-hmm.
my frustration, as much as I love my alma mater, one of my frustrations working on a college campus was often that you would run into the attitude of, yeah, but we have this tradition. This is the way we've always done it. And
Oh,
this
that's the kiss of death.
it's the kiss of death. And there's that great book, that little short book that would take your students about, 2 hours at the most, if they're speed readers, about 45 minutes to read, called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yep.
And
Guys, if y'all don't have the book, Who Moved My Cheese,
that's
please get
it's
that book.
it's a great book. I mean, I kind of tell people that's like, that's the essence of that book is like embrace change, roll with the punches. Um, again, for your young folks, you and I have had this conversation over, bottles of wine and martinis at La Bilbo K. I
Many
mean,
times.
we have started down one path, and it was so funny when you sent your email back to me yesterday about the, like pivot. You're right. We'll start down one path, realize that when we built the plan, started executing on the plan, we didn't understand that there was a 6 foot thick brick wall about a mile down the highway. Well, we're smart enough now. There was a time when we might not have been smart enough. We might have run into it a couple of times earlier in our career. But now when we see that brick wall and we get close enough to see it, we're like, okay, we're entrepreneurs. The wind's changed, the world's changed. Let's just turn and go down this road instead. And you just pivot and you go in another direction. And my experience with human nature is that is unnatural for most people's.
Yeah, counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive. And yet if you're 22 years old or 20 years old or 25 years old and you're listening to this, what the hell have you got to lose? I mean,
Right.
what the hell have you got to lose? I mean, this is like that's what life is all about, is like reinventing yourself, reinventing a business, disrupting a business, coming up with a great idea. And so I would be with your young folks, I would be encouraging, because they don't have to be committed to a thing in the way it's always been.
Hmm.
And I just think that's a great, so the winners will be the people that understand that, whether they're 22 years old or whether they're 62 years old. The winners are the people who understand that you get in times like this, and you better have great flexibility and be willing to move in lots of different directions.
Well, we have a couple of many sayings within Melt University, but one is life is not linear. They're learning that at an early age. Secondly, change is inevitable, growth is optional. Choose wisely. So, in the spirit of change, in the spirit of disruption, in the spirit of growth in college athletics, there are several major things evolving right now. One is with the student athletes are soon going to have permission to monetize their name, image, and likeness. We need to talk about what that means and where you see those opportunities lie. We know there's going to be a challenge for getting fans back in those seats, whether it's economic challenge, safety challenge, COVID challenge. We've got an evolution of empowered student athletes now. But within all of this, in the header of growth, where do you see opportunities for our listeners, our students, our kids to really begin to pivot, evolve, and shine in this environment?
So so you kind of ask a multifaceted question. So you ask questions like I do, Vince. There might be no beginning and no end. Uh, I would say, first of all, on the NIL thing, it that is not something, in my view, that's going to make a whole lot of student athletes rich.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a be careful what you wish for proposition. All right. So let me first start by saying this. I would love to see, basketball's helping solve for um, the kid who wants to go straight from high school into professional sports with the G League, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a great first step. I applaud Adam Silver, who I think is maybe the smartest guy in all of sports,
Mm-hmm.
is also a great friend. Um, but I think what they've done there is actually long term is going to be helpful to the game of college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So I, because I'm a little old school on this, you know, I I think if you go to Wake Forest, if you graduate from high school at 18 years old, and you go to a school where you get an $80,000 a year room board tuition, plus all the perks that come along with being a college football player. Um, I I mean, there are not many 18-year-olds who get $80,000 a year jobs, and it's really plus 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 plus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and preparing them for life. Uh, and as you know, I have this big bias about student athletes. I think the best entry level employees I've pretty much hired almost
Yeah.
over my whole career, former student athletes, because they come in understanding teamwork, esprit de corps, time management, etc. So, um, so having said that, NIL's here. Okay, Cole Anthony would have made a whole bunch of money according to all the reports last year had they had it at the University of North Carolina. He would have made more than any other player in college football or basketball.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the be careful what you wish for part. What about the other guys in the locker room that aren't going to get anything? And
Mm-hmm.
what's that going
Wow.
to do? What's that going to do to the culture of that basketball team? So if one kid's making $440,000 a year and another kid's making $11,000 a year, and the other 9 or 10 kids that are on scholarship on that men's basketball team, what do they think about that? Are
Right.
they really going to celebrate that their friend, their brother, is making all this money? And I'm not picking on Cole Anthony. He's actually one of my favorite players in college basketball in the last 2
Right.
years. And but I who can blame him? I mean, you take what the opportunity is that's right there
Mhm.
in front of you. But I think people have to remember that, you know, and it'll be interesting because you'll have some Olympic swimmers who swim at Cal, and you'll have some track and field people who run track at Arkansas who are going to make more than any college football or basketball player.
Correct.
And so it's not it's not as clean cut as all the sports writers would have us think it might be.
Right.
And so I think that's something to kind of consider. But I do think that's a business. Now, here's another severe unintended consequence. You've been a marketing guy your whole career, and so have I. All right.
Mhm.
Coca-Cola, Southern companies, BB&T, whomever, they got, this is the budget that they put together for marketing and advertising, sponsorship spend in their Fortune 1000 company for this year. The budget is the budget is the budget. If they decide, we think we ought to be betting on Zion Williamson and Cole Anthony and the quarterback at Alabama and the swimmer at Cal, where do you think that money's going to come from? It's
Right.
it's going to come from the pot of sponsorship that the school was getting. So
Mhm.
so if there's anybody at an institutional level that thinks that this isn't going to negatively impact their take, they're not awake, because it's going to come out of your share and
Right.
go to that player instead, or it's going to come from somewhere, but that budget's finite. And most of them say, this is my budget for pro sports, this is my budget for college sports, this is, et cetera, et cetera. And and that's going to have a ripple effect because there are going to be less dollars rolling downhill to maybe non-power 65 schools. And so there are multiple implications of this from this. But do I think, I mean, at the end of the day, the people who are representing athletes in NIL, they're just agents. They're not any
Mhm.
different than the agents for PGA Tour pros or NBA
Right.
basketball players or prospective NBA basketball players. They're just agents, and they're just going to make their 10% commission on whatever they go out and sell for that kid. And it's, as you know, I mean, that's if that's really what you want to do with your life, that's fine. It wasn't what I want to do with mine. I have lots of great friends that are agents, but that wouldn't. It's hard to be interested in something that's just kind of a 10% commission business.
It's
So
tough,
so
and that
so
is a
quite
tough
well,
existence.
quite frankly, it doesn't interest me. And
Mhm.
and so it interests me about as much as practicing law. I have a law degree, so and I've never practiced
Right.
law. But the other part of it is I don't think I don't foresee where players are going to just make millions of dollars from this either. And
Mhm.
so, and again, I don't think it's going to be widespread, but there are going to be opportunities created around all of this. So you can take all the the places where I said there were going to be friction and all the unintended consequences that might be severe or not so severe. At every one of those creases, there is some opportunity that could be created.
Mhm.
And so if I'm Zach or Sam or Gigi or whoever else might be listening on this call, I would be thinking about that, you know.
Mhm.
And I just think that's really important to kind of capture in the conversation.
And as a student coming back to campus, and as fans coming back in attendance to the games and the experience and the tailgating and the safety and sanitization, do you see opportunities for career development and growth for kids on that campus? Because I keep coming back to this: the campus is the ultimate professional lab. We interviewed Ross Bjork of Texas A&M this week, and he talked about the areas of mental health. He talked about the new fan experience, mining data to get the fans back. They may not have the discretionary income. So talk about where your vision, because obviously you're always looking around these corners. What advice and vision would you give to these kids when they get back to school this fall to look for these new opportunities?
The first thing I would say is that um, while I'm not the greatest rule follower of all time, I am a germaphobe. So I would I
Right.
would I would follow the rules. I mean, I really would. This is a once in a century type occurrence that we're in. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this will be a whole chapter in history books one day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if people really want to have college football, if they want to have live sports, if they want to go to tailgate parties, if they want to go to fraternity parties, they're going to social distance, they're going to wear masks, um, they're going to self-isolate when they've been exposed. And all that's going to be required, in my view, for people to come into college football stadia or professional football stadia this fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first thing I would say. Second thing is that every athletic director in the country that I've talked to, and by the way, I have a list on my desk. I've been keeping up with it for the last 15 weeks. I've had 34 different Power 65 or FBS athletic directors reach out to me in the last 15 weeks, and frankly, most of them in the last 6 weeks. They
Mm-hmm.
called me and they're asking, hey, what are you thinking about this, or what are you hearing about that? And it's been great. I mean, first of all, it makes me realize how blessed I am to have all these incredibly wonderful personal and professional relationships and associations. Um, and so I, but they're all having to do more with less this year.
Mm-hmm.
They're furloughing employees. They're having to lay off employees. They're having to not fill positions that people leave to go to another school or go to a different industry or retired from. And this is going to be a difficult year financially because college athletic department financial modeling, with the exception of about 5 or 6 schools
Mm-hmm.
that are just flush with cash, with the possible exception of 5 or 6 schools, this is just not the model. This, in current economic environment with a pandemic and not being able to realize even the same upside that you had last year, this year, this is just not a model that they're built for. And this is a complete wrench in a evolving 50-year system. And so I think there will be opportunities for young folks on college campuses to go in and say, I think I can go to a professor and get course credit, and and write a paper and learn, get on the job learning, and come work in the athletic department and not have to make any money, so that I get an apprenticeship in the purest form of apprenticeships. Uh, would you hire me, Mr. Associate Athletic Director, to work on game day and help? Because they're actually going to need more people, not less. And there's going to be more opportunity that, in my view, to do things, to make live sports happen this year. And I would tell you that I've probably talked to 24 college student athletes, and not just at my alma mater, around the country. I have yet to talk to one that doesn't want to play. And not only
Wow.
that, they're not, they have a burning passion to play. And I go back to my thing a moment ago. I wish that the XFL or something else would hit, where kids that want to make money for playing football and don't care about as much about the college education and getting the degree can go straight from high school or can leave college after a year and go play professional football and make money. Yes, there are people out there who are saying, um, that, well, we shouldn't play and enrich the schools and not get paid. Let me tell you, I go back. There's 5 or 6 schools that are going to be fine, but everybody else is living hand to mouth or worse right now.
Well,
And
you hit on a couple things. I personally believe and think the NFL could buy the XFL and create a G League type environment for the kids that want to go right into that. But
yeah,
that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But what you just hit on is that with more athletic departments being asked and tasked to do more with less is going to create the greatest opportunity for students and student volunteers to go into that Auburn athletic department, go into that Wake Forest athletic department and say, hey, let me be part of a living lab. Go to your professors, go to your teachers, go to career development, convert that into, and I did that at Auburn with David Housel, convert that into class credits, stack that resume, with experience, with relationships, and network building that you and I have done par excellence. So, students, if you're listening, you just got a gargantuan nugget that I want you to play over and over again. And so Ben, as we wrap this, talk about. I mean, obviously, you're one of the greatest American entrepreneurs there is, and in sports and in other areas. But what are your sources, resources, podcasts, books, websites? What inspires you? Who inspires you, if anybody, that you would advise the students to go? You talked about Who Moved My Cheese, which is a great one. Are there other people, podcasts, books, resources, places that you would direct them to?
Yeah, I would say so. I want to add one other thing just so they can think about this. If you got PGA events or ATP tennis events or anything else that's coming, you know who all the volunteers are for those events? Because
Mm-hmm.
everything that's being played later this summer and the fall, they're hoping to have some fans there. All the volunteers are retirees. They're 70, they're 80 years old. They can't volunteer this year,
Correct.
right? Because they're in the at-risk category. So I just believe there's going to be lots of opportunity, but understand going in, if it were me, I would go in and say, do not pay me a cent. I'm going to get course credit. I'm going to get experience. Uh, I care about that more than I care about anything else. Because if they could afford to pay you, they wouldn't have had to lay off staff to begin with.
Bingo.
So let me just say that on books, etc. And I'm going to leave you with a quote today that I just love from the great Ted Forsman. But on every person that works with me is basically it's our Bible is that they're required to read Jim Collins' Good to Great and Jim Collins and Jerry Porras's Built to Last. And they're just, to me, they're the two most stellar business books that were ever written. Um, I read lots of other stuff. I love military strategy. I mean, I've been privileged in my life to get to spend a decent amount of time with Secretary Bob Gates, who served
Mm-hmm.
multiple presidents, Democratic and Republican. The great General Mad Dog Mattis. Um, but my favorite writer of all time is frankly John Wooden. I just, I've read every book I think that Coach Wooden wrote, and I find that he comes from a place in his coaching that is just really important to me. He was a very spiritual, faithful
Mm-hmm.
person, and I like the foundation he has for the kinds of advice and coaching that he dispensed all those years. So those would be the kind of the top of my thing. But I have to read you this quote. Now, most of the time I can remember it from memory, but just in case, I'm going to pull it up here.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that bought my company the first time, I'm in that group of people that's privileged to have sold stock in the same company 3 different times.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
That's a hell of a deal.
but it is, if you can get it. But the entrepreneur, as a creator of the new and a destroyer of the old, is constantly in conflict with convention. He inhabits a world where belief precedes results and where the best possibilities are usually invisible to others. His world is dominated by denial, rejection, difficulty, and doubt. And although as an innovator, he is unceasingly imitated when successful, he always remains an outsider to the quote establishment. He is usually found disturbing and irritating, even unemployable. Every time Teddy would repeat that when he would see me, he'd see me. He says, "When I think about my quote, I think about you." And
Wow.
so
You're the poster child for a Ted Forsman
I
quote. It's
said,
pretty strong.
I said, except for the unemployable part, right, Teddy? So,
Right.
but it's, we had very different management styles, but I did appreciate, the first company he bought was in North Carolina, Kincaid Furniture. The last company he bought was mine, also in North Carolina. And I always really, I think that is a great quote. You can find it online. And I think it talks a lot about being, kind of the disruptive, innovating, seeing around corners, not caring whether people thought your question or idea was stupid. I mean, being an entrepreneur requires acquiring thick skin rapidly. And, this is one of the things I used to talk to Coach Battle about. And, just really, being able to try new things and think about things in a very different way. And, as we talked about earlier, being able to pivot when you screw up, being able to admit it, but also having the fortitude, being disruptive, being innovative, being willing to get knocked down, and get back up and get in the game, I think is just a great thing. Somebody, Coach Eddie Sutton, who unfortunately I wasn't related to that I know of, as you know, passed away a few weeks ago, right after he found out he was going to be inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. But somebody said, one of his favorite sayings was, he thought that drawing a charge was the greatest play in basketball. And he was right, because drawing a charge is the most courageous play in all of basketball.
Right.
And you think about how many times that kind of play changes the entire course and outcome of a game. And Coach Eddie Sutton was spot on with that analysis, in my view.
Well, and I want to, as we close, to our listeners, Who Moved My Cheese, required reading. Do your research on Ted Forsman, one of the greatest, investors of all time. Forsman and Little. Bill Battle is a name that has come up and will come up. One of my great mentors, Ben's great mentors, one of the greatest gentlemen of all time
ever.
Listeners, look up Coach Battle. Coach John Wooden came up in an earlier podcast, The Wizard of Westwood. He's one of the greatest teachers of all time. Built to Last, tremendous book. Good to Great. These are just tremendous resources and priceless resources. And Ben, I can't thank you enough. This is fascinating. We could go on, all evening. Ben Sutton, the founder and chairman of Teall Capital Partners. That's Teall.
Stands for Touch 'em All. Baseball.
Touch 'em all. A great baseball quote. And got a lot of great companies. You're going to hear a lot more from him and students. And what I've also admired about Ben is he's always had a tremendous team. He's always had a tremendous culture. He always is willing to do whatever everybody else is doing, on his team. But I'm telling you, this is a guy you want to be in touch with. You want to follow his companies. Chances are, when you go back to school, one of his companies, for instance, Tailgate Guys, they're working on campuses all across the country. Tremendous opportunities to work and volunteer. But I think the other thing you hear from him is this tremendous amount of passion that he's always had, whether he was an undergrad student, graduate student, working at Wake Forest, being a disruptor, seeing around those corners. And I think, after you listen to him, you can see why that, he's a tremendous, great American success story. So, Ben, what a tremendous session, what a tremendous opportunity. And you have no idea how thankful and appreciative that we are that you've taken your time today in this crazy, busy, chaotic environment to share your wisdom with the students of Melt University. So we certainly appreciate you today.
Glad to do it, brother. Y'all take care.
So students, Melt U, we roll on Summer Virtual 2020. Thank you, Ben, and we'll be back soon.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.